True North is an original podcast by Due North PR. We do everything we can to ensure that everything we broadcast is fair and factual, but the opinions expressed and statements made by our guests are theirs and theirs alone. These opinions and statements do not reflect the views or opinions of our presenters, Due North PR, or the podcast itself. You're listening to True North, a regular roundup of business and community news and developments in Northland. Hello, and welcome to True North. Thank you for taking the time to listen. It's Wednesday, the 28th of May. I'm Peter Heath. On the show ahead.
And so we muddled through in 2008, which was also part of the GSC. And then we muddled through to 2009, at which point I realised we were insolvent.
I speak with Jane Hindle, stalwart of the Thompson Sailing Trust and freshly elected to the Trust's board, about the highs, lows, whys and hows of her 28-year journey with the Trust. First though, a look at what's happening in business and community news across our region. Organisations still planning to apply for project funding from the Taitokoro Impact Fund in one of the funding rounds previously advertised on the Northland Inc. website will need to think again, and they'll need to get their skates on. The evaluating panel dished out 44% of the $450,000 contestable fund in the April round and has subsequently decided to ditch funding rounds 3 and 4. And that's not all. The window for the single remaining funding round has been narrowed by a month, with a revised application deadline of Friday the 6th of June. We asked the panel why the previously advertised schedule of funding rounds was slashed so suddenly and without notice, potentially disadvantaging organisations who had planned to apply in the later funding rounds. Their response was that they felt that their advertised schedule of 4 rounds served only to draw out the process, that given the interest there was no point stretching it out, and that they were keen that the money should be accessed and set to work as quickly as possible. Those organisations able to submit an application to the June funding round may find themselves going up against applications that were unsuccessful in the first round. The fund managers have decided to allow unsuccessful applications to resubmit. The panel does not feel that statistically this will disadvantage organisations who chose to submit in later stages. They tell us that each application will be considered on its own merit, that application criteria remain the same, and that each application is individually assessed by each panel member, then ranked and discussed. We may never know the details of the recipients of the Taitokoro Impact Fund, which, remember, was lobbied for and established in the name of Northland's business community following the huge disruption caused by the Transpower electricity pylon collapse in June last year. The panel tells us that it decided not to name the recipients because many projects were still getting up off the ground and some may be bound by commercial sensitivities. They're therefore allowing the projects to release their funding details as they're ready to do so. We'll put a link to the fund application details in the show notes. You might have seen images of, or even experienced for yourself, robo-taxis such as those run by Waymo, where you're driven around not by a human, but by a machine, with the steering wheel moving magically as if there was an invisible driver at the controls. All very well on the road, maybe, but how about if, instead of a taxi, you were in an aeroplane? Well, Merlin, the leading developer of assured autonomous flight technology for fixed-wing aircraft, announced last week that it has received an experimental certificate of airworthiness from the Civil Aviation Authority of New Zealand. The certificate grants Merlin, which has a development centre at the Bay of Islands Airport in Kerikeri, approval to conduct certification flight testing of its technology in New Zealand, marking a pivotal step in the company's final push towards achieving the world's first certification of what it calls takeoff to touchdown autonomy. In a news release, Merlin said the CAA would participate in the work in a risk management and intelligence capacity. Additionally, Merlin secured test pilot approvals in New Zealand, allowing for concurrent test flights across multiple aircraft. It says this advancement reduces the overall timeline to certification and accelerates Merlin's path towards commercial readiness for its autonomy platform. We'll put a link to the Merlin news release in the show notes. So, Northland's Thompson Sailing Trust is, I think it's fair to say, a regional institution. The trust has been operating since 2006 and is centred around an old-style sailing ship, a gaff-rigged, square-top sail schooner, a replica of the trading vessels that used to ply the coastal shipping routes up and down New Zealand in days gone by. The Trust's principal purpose is youth development, using the sea and the ship to help equip Northland's youth with a wide range of skills, lessons, and personal development opportunities that will be of value to them in their lives. For those involved with the Trust, it's truly a labour of love, and one that, for all its heartwarming upsides, is also fraught with challenge and angst. One of those most closely associated with the Trust is Jane Hindle, a prominent Northlander, accomplished businesswoman, respected board director, and community leader. Jane helped establish the Trust along with the original owner Russell Harris back in 2006 and served for many years as an Executive Trustee. Now, 20 years later, and after a small break, she's just joined the Trust's board. I'm delighted to have Jane with me today to talk through the ups and downs, ins and outs, and whys and hows of her journey with the Trust and the beautiful old vessel at the heart of it all, the R. Tucker Thompson herself. Tēnā koe, Jane, and thanks for joining us on True North. Haere mai.
Tēnā koe, Peter. Thank you.
It's been a bit of a roller coaster, this one, hasn't it, Jane? What was the thinking behind setting up the Trust back in 2006? And nearly 20 years later, where are you at? And how close do you think you've come to achieving your original objectives?
Well, that's a big question, Peter, and probably bigger than just the ship itself. It's about sort of having a strategy and a vision. Back in the 80s, I used to work in the IT industry, in the telco, in the data communications industry. And we had a situation where we were told we were going to be shut down. And we ran a small business unit. There was about 50 people involved. We had about $150 million turnover. And we said, oh, look, give us 6 months. We'll come up with a plan and we'll make it work. And so we went away. And what we did was we brought everybody on board, all of those 50 people or so. And we all came together and we created something new and different. And we survived and we kept going. And when I reflect on that, it taught me about how important it was to bring people along with you. So fast forward to the 90s. I'm in the technology industry again, and I'm in data communications and telecommunications, and similar sort of situation within Clear, where again we've got a small team, we want to make things happen, and there's all sorts of insurmountable challenges. But we got creative and we came together and we worked really hard and we came up with solutions that actually helped us change the face of the market. In the 1990s, when we first started coming up to Russell Kororaraka, our son, my stepson, they had some places, and he's actually whakapapa to Northland, and so he got on a youth voyage. And it was at the end of the youth voyage that Russell said to me, I could really do some help running this thing with marketing, with kind of doing more. And I was sitting there picking up our wayward son, who was very much a problem child. And he'd been out on the ship for 7 days with these bunch of kids from Ngāpuhi Social Services. And I said, okay. And Clear was just at that time starting a business mentoring program. That business mentoring program was just starting off in the late 90s. And the call out had gone to managers in Clear saying, do you want to mentor anybody? And I went, I've got one. Can I just go and mentor this one? And they said, sure, go for your life. And so that's how it started in about 1997. So I started working with Russell to look at the business and analysing the kind of things that you do in a larger business, like the metrics of what makes you money, all the really important things. And so I met Mike Sim from Fuller's. I started to build relationships with Mike and work at how the ship could be better in tourism by kind of working more closely. I'm a big believer in collaboration and relationships. It really doesn't work if you haven't got collaboration. And so when I moved up here, I got this work at the council, and Russell said, I haven't got anybody to pay the wages. I don't know how to send the invoices to Fuller's. So I went, okay, I'll come and give you a hand. And that was 2000. And so I just kind of started mentoring him. But by 2004, I kind of went, well, we can't just keep doing this forever. We need to do something different. We need to actually kind of, Russell was coming up to 65, and we needed to figure out how to protect the ship. and had a.
So at that point, was most of your business coming out of Fuller's? Were you
It was all
taking?
coming out of us. Fuller's
All
were
right.
our sole agent. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So this was all about day trips out on the bay
Yep.
with
We did all it
with
was day trips on
Fuller's
the bay
customers.
and 4 youth
Yep.
voyages a year. And
Right.
because we had nothing in winter, we did 2 offshore voyages. And then Mike Sim left Fuller's, they changed hands, and then they dropped us as a product. So we were literally left on our own. So I had a very rapid entry into learning how to run a tourism business myself, because Fuller's was doing all that previously. So that was hugely stressful. And that's kind of when I went, can't keep doing this for the rest of my life. We need to have a better plan than this. And so the idea of using the ship as, I said, this is an amazing asset for Northland. It can do so many things for so many people. I'd already done some offshore voyaging to the States in 2002 and 2005. And all of the people, you could see how it changed their lives. Literally, the kids on the voyages, the people that went on longer voyages, it was literally life-changing experience. So you had this amazing potential to do something with this wonderful ship. But if we didn't do something different, we were going to just basically go bankrupt and go in a hole. So all credit to Russell.
Let me just ask. I'm reluctant to stop the narrative because it's it's a great story, but I'm keen to understand and let's get back to it. So at that particular point, let's put a bookmark there. But just you've just said something which intrigues. It's about the life-changing nature of being involved in a voyage. Just before we come back to that narrative, can you talk to me a little bit about what it is that happens on the ship that is so compelling? Because to an outsider, it might seem that a couple of days on a ship is not going to be enough to change somebody's views on life. How is it so compelling?
Well, it's interesting because when we first came up with our goals of what it was, we put life-changing experiences for everyone who comes on board. And you kind of go, well, that's not that easy to do on a day sail. But actually, for some people, it is. I was on the ship on board in Ventura at Oxnard Harbour, and this lady came on board with a photo album. And she sat down beside me and she said, this was the best day of my life when I came out on the Tucker in 1985. I think it was 1995. She said, I just got married. It was our honeymoon. It was the most amazing experience, the best trip of our holiday. And when we got home, my husband was diagnosed with cancer and he died 6 months later. She said, I will always remember the Tucker and what it means to me. Sorry, I'm cracking up because she was crying and I was crying, and it was just, and I hear those stories time and time again. Even when I was working in Fuller's, I'd get kids come up, in their 20s going, our parents sent us here. They did the Tucker on their honeymoon in 1981 and they remember it. And you just hear this over and over again. So for me personally, I did a history voyage as cook, and we climbed the Duke's Nose. And if you've ever climbed the Duke's Nose, there's a bit of the top where it's got a chain.
Yes,
and I went, I can't do this. I can't do this. And I stood at the bottom and everybody else had jumped up. And Wirimu and his young student called Mo, who came out with us, they got me up there. They coached me up there. They got me up there. And I got up to the top of the Duke's Nose. And I came home feeling like I had conquered Everest. So that's the little things that it does. And on a day sail, people climb the rigging and they don't think they can do that. And they challenge themselves to do things because the crew, who are quite amazing, give them a space to challenge themselves to do something they didn't believe they could. And they come off going, I can achieve anything because I didn't think I could do that.
Right.
And so on a 7-day voyage, we used to say that there's a turn, and some kids take longer than others for the turn. And if you take 4 days on a voyage, it's not as successful. Most kids turn after about day 3, but you get a few that kind of just aren't quite getting there. But by day 5, they're there. And there's that turn in the behavior of how they behave. And so 7 days was we didn't want to shorten it. We discussed at length, should we make them 5 days and get more in, or should we do this or do, but you can still get the same as a great experience and a life-changing experience on something like going on a short trip and just challenging yourself to climb the ribbing or go up the Duke's nose or whatever.
Okay,
Because
my apologies. I interrupted the narrative. So you got to the point where you had discussed that you needed to do something that was beyond where you had been. You just lost the Fuller's business.
Yep.
You had your four voyages with SIFs. So what were the next steps?
So I worked with some people, Steve Bennett and Carol Taplin, and said if we move this ship into a trust, we could then attract other people to help us. The key thing was just Russell and me, and we were a commercial enterprise. But if we actually step back and let the ship take its own course, then other people would come and help us look after the ship. It was all about moving the ship into a space where other people could take ownership. And so the first person I called, and Russell, to his credit, said, okay. And every now and then you go, so how does this work? I don't own the ship anymore. And I let go, and I said, and it was a gifting process. He didn't give his ship away. There's a gifting process where you transfer money each month, but he didn't sell it. So right. He got a stipend each month to recognize the debt acknowledgement. So it was good for him because he could still be involved with the ship. He was still Russell of the Tucker. He still had an emotional tie to it. But we had other people helping us look after the ship. And we also could then, hopefully, if we were a charity, attract grants and funding. And that comes to another story when you ask about the challenges. So the idea was we spread the love for the ship. We got ownership of the ship. And we got Kaitiaki to look after her with different skills for different areas, and then made sure that we made her accessible to as many people as possible, but particularly focused on our Northland youth. But it doesn't.
So how did you go about doing that? How did you expand that youth participation? Because at this point you had four voyages a year through SIFs. How did you go about then sort of expanding that exposure to the kids?
It was incredibly hard. So the first thing that happened after this genius plan was we had the GFC. So our tourism season, which was meant to earn some money that we could put on and do a few more youth voyages, was one of the worst tourism seasons that we had experienced since the financial crisis in the 90s. So we ended summer with virtually no surplus in the bank to cover winter. And we were, to put it mildly, a little bit of a pickle. And so we managed to get a little bit of funding from a few places, and we almost gave we still had our 4 voyages from Child, Youth and Family. And we did 7 voyages all up, but nobody understood what we were doing because there was no proven track record. All of these things lead into different actions as we move forward in the journey, but no track record, no evidence-based behavior. So we did 7 voyages, and they were very hard, and we literally had to kind of beg people. We put kids on for no money. We got a few people doing some donations, and we just struggled through. There was 1.5 people, myself and Rachel Kennedy, running this gig, and it was tough. And so we muddled through in 2008, which was also part of the GSC, and then we muddled through to 2009. At which point I realized we were insolvent.
Wow. Okay.
Wow. Yeah. So there's nothing like being insolvent, to wake up, each morning and go, where are we going to get the money from?
And you've got a thing bobbing on the briny, sort of absorbing as much salt water as it can at every possible moment.
The thing was, it was a cash flow crisis. It really was a cash flow crisis, not a fundamental problem. And, when you're a 1-year-old charity, nobody's going to fund you. But in your second year, people will start to talk to you. So we were in year 2.5, and we'd done 2 years of voyages, and we could actually articulate and show what we were doing. And that day where we had the crisis board meeting, we got our first funding from lotteries. And we just burst into tears. It was $25,000. And I cannot tell you the feeling that it made. But it wasn't enough to do the whole the
That
youth
would have been a
voyages.
huge relief, I imagine. Hey.
Yeah, but we'd had a couple of people who had donated, and I approached one of them, Mike Daniel, and said, "Hey, Mike, would you possibly maybe give us a couple of voyages this year, and could we have it now?" And he said, "Are you in a bit of a pickle?" And I said, "Yes." So I actually went down, I sat down with the budgets and the spreadsheets and the plan, and he looked at it, he said, "Yep, it's sound. I'm going to underwrite the trust." And so he underwrote the trust to the tune of $100,000. And I said, "We won't need $100,000. I'm short of 60K. He said, I'm going to underwrite to 100,000. We only ever needed 60K. And the rest, as we say, is history. But that moment where you kind of like, what am I going to do? How am I going to pay the bills? I'll never forget. And it clearly, it's why certain things like diversity of revenue streams and all of those things are so important, particularly for small organizations, so that you haven't got all your eggs in one basket.
So was your guardian angel the Mike Daniel of Northland Port Corporation? Was that
correct? Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
And
okay.
The other people that helped us at the outset, who a big vote of thanks for, Russell Shaw from Top Energy and Far North Holdings, both of whom agreed to sponsor a voyage. So we had our core people. We had Far North Holdings, we had Top Energy, and we had Mike Daniel and some lotteries money. And with that, we were able to keep going. And then it was about actually building the reputations.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
have you got
seven voyages, went to 11 voyages, went to 12 voyages, went to 14 voyages. And then when I finished up, it was 17 voyages a year.
Okay.
And we had savings in the bank that would keep us going for at least a year and a half. So we could weather the storm.
All right. The kids that come on these voyages, Jane, they come from a wide range of backgrounds, don't they? They're not all sort of out of the social services framework. There's a wide range, and was that deliberate?
Yeah.
How has that happened? And can you describe a little bit about the kinds of kids that get involved and what these different types of kids get out of it in different ways?
Yeah, so that was one of the biggest challenges that when we started was, we know that there's the ship that took the kids away from SIPs, the bad kids, and the Spirit, they take the good kids, and that was a really hard, prejudicial thing to kind of move away from. So it was really
Spirit being Spirit of New Zealand, which is another tall ship based trust.
Yeah,
am I correct? Yeah.
Okay. We were really clear that we were Taitokara, and we looked after our own kids. We looked after kids from Taitokara because we understood them. So it was a very deliberate effort to mix and match the kids from different nationalities. So we had a blend of Maori and Pākehā. We had a blend of kids that family had need of sponsorship or grants, and families that could afford to pay. And it was a gradual, it was reputation, but when you started getting some of the senior kids or some of the the prefects and stuff like that, what the prefects, there's no such thing as a bad kid, there is no such thing as a bad kid. There's a kid that's got a difficult home life, that perhaps has got difficult faces limited opportunities, but they're good kids. Give them a chance and they will shine. So you'd find that the kids that perhaps weren't excelling at school would be really, really good at the kinetic things that the ship teaches you. And some of the fancy schmancy, very academic, very very smart kids were actually quite dumb when it came to common sense. So it was a great leveler. And the other thing, kids are not prejudiced. Prejudices are learned. When you put all the kids on the ship and they all get together, they don't care if they've got a disability or they're from a different color or from a different nationality or from a different home. They might be a bit marveled by the things that some kids talk about and other kids talk about, but they're kids and they make friends with each other and they work together. And that's the whole point. And so once you understand somebody and you get to know somebody, you don't see the fact that they've got one leg or they're brown or they've got a tattoo or they've got whatever it is that makes them different from you. They're your friend And some of these friendships are long and enduring. And we brought them together as kids and helped them not fall into the prejudicial traps that, people that don't get the opportunity to do these kind of programs. All kids are equal, none of them are good or bad. They just need to be given a chance.
So, Jane, what is it about the trust that is so compelling for you? You've just rejoined, you've just become re-involved with the trust through becoming a board member. What is it about this particular organization that calls you back time and time again? And what stopped you from going, okay, well, I've done my dash on this one, I'm going to go off and lend my skills in some other direction?
Well, in terms of the duration of my tenure, there were always different things to be doing and things to keep me interested. And I always intended, when there was sufficient money in the bank, to replace me with a full-time person. And we had our premises on the wharf. COVID caused a bit of a problem, so it did delay, but my intention was always to step back when we were in a stable position. I was invited back, I think because they felt that they needed the institutional knowledge. So I don't go back with any agenda. There's a new board. I don't know them. I haven't had a board meeting yet. I have been mentoring Kat and giving her some benefit of my knowledge because she didn't get a handover. And I think that was helpful for her to have some institutional knowledge. But they've been 1 hour sessions or 2 hour sessions, and there's been 6 of them. So it's not like I'm, over 6 months. So they've been, so really, I think it's just about having some institutional knowledge, because Russell has gone off the board. Kim Borgstrom's gone off the board, and they are all new people. So I think it was just would you lend us your institutional knowledge, because clearly it's been helpful for Catherine to have a bit of that, and I'll stay as long as I think they need me. I'm certainly not going back to run the joint or get involved on a day-to-day thing. I don't need
but
another
you'll still
chicken
be
crisis.
climbing mast.
I don't need another chicken crisis, trust me.
You must be immensely proud of the trust when you speak with it, when you speak about it, and I've heard you speak about it in a number of different fora. You light up. You kind of you tear up sometimes, as you did a minute ago. It's obviously a huge part of you, Jane. What is it that's what is it that's made it so special for you?
My then fiance and I saw the Tucker in 1995 on the water from our boat in the Bay of Islands, and we looked at her and said, let's get married on board. So we did. And so we got married on board. Then our son, my stepson, went on a youth voyage, and that changed his life. And I saw this ship that had this amazing power for good.
Yeah.
And when I actually finished up and said goodbye to all the crew on my final day, I just said, this ship has an amazing opportunity to be a force for good in Tai Tokerau. And it's there for you to use in that way. Make sure you do. Because everything we can do with that ship makes people's lives better. Nobody goes on board the ship and goes, oh, I had the most awful time. And, you look at all the horrible things that go on, and here's something that we can actually change people's lives and make them better.
So you said
so much of that go on. And the other thing is also the people that have come through the ship. It's about the ship and the crew. The ship is amazing, but it's surrounded by the crew. And the crew have come through and given themselves to her. And many of them have gone on and got great jobs in the maritime industry. We've had trainees come back and be crew and get jobs in the maritime industry. They've all also learned great skills. And some of them have gone on, I've groomed some of them to be my successor, but unfortunately they went back to Canada. And but others have gone on that I've sort of mentored, and they've gone on and got bigger, better jobs in the maritime industry. So it's all about developing people. The ship develops people. It develops, and the crew look after the ship. I look after the office,
Mm.
the admin
Yeah.
people. Our job is to look after the crew who look after the ship, and it's this wonderful force of good. We can make people's lives better with her.
Okay. All right. So Jane, you've worn this ship like a cloak for many, many years, and it suits you well. Um, what's next for you? You're known as Jane of the Tucker, and I'm interested to know what's next for you. What are your personal goals and ambitions?
Yes, well, I've actually managed to kind of shape the Jane as a Tucker, and I'm pleased that it's Cat of the Tucker or Catherine of the Tucker. She's taken over, and I'm really really pleased that we've got somebody with passion. But for me, I guess what motivates me is making a difference, and I'm fortunate that I have sufficient money with the pension and things to not have to do things I don't like. I will do things that interest me. And I've always said to people, look, if I can help in any way, give me a yell. But I will pick and choose the things that interest me. Like 2 Year 250 was something that really interested me. It was something that was really important about bringing people together and learning about each other. It's kind of like, again, bringing them together on the ship, weaving Himuka Tangata, weaving the people together and understanding each other. Because if you know about each other, then you've broken down those prejudices. So those sort of things are really of interest to me. And yeah, I kind of stumbled into the community board role because nobody else would do it. I'm not sure how long I'll keep doing that, but it was kind of like, is anybody else going to stick their hand up? But yeah, I've always got capacity for one or two little projects, and so if anything needs doing that you think might interest me, I'm happy for a quick corridor with anybody.
That's good. You're involved, I think, with a little bit to do with the Institute of Directors in Northland.
Yeah, so
and
governance.
there's a lot of travel on your horizon. I think you came back from an amazing sounding trip to Japan not that long
That
ago.
was 2 years ago. That was 2 years ago. We are planning. We're planning to go back
time
to
for another.
Canada. We are planning to go back for Canada and do a cruise. One of the things about technically being retired is that you are meant to have time for travel, and I figured that we should probably try and do some before either of us drop dead. So yeah, trying to do a bit more stuff that's kind of for us is quite important. But yeah, and the Institute of Directors, I am really keen on good governance, because that does actually make the foundation for an organization's ethics and values. And yeah, you just need to do the right thing,
Yeah, I'm going to be speaking with Mike Sim about that before too long,
Yeah.
and talking about some of the challenges that Northland organizations
Yeah.
face in
Well,
that
so
sphere.
you heard I met Mike in the 1990s, and he was the
Yes,
first
yeah.
person I phoned up and asked to come on the board of the Tucker. And he was the last person to step back from the original board. So he was with the board for 18 years, which was a huge commitment. And yes, I've been working with him at the Economic Development Agency, and I worked with Mike on the Institute of Directors, and he's just been given an award for that. He's put a huge amount in. I've got a huge respect for Mike Sim.
We'll be chatting that through. Jane, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. You're always a ray of sunshine, and a good draft of dynamism as well. Actually, I always feel energized after having spoken with you. So thank you for lending us some of your time, and all the very, very best for what follows, both with the Tucker and everything else. And look after yourself.
Thank you, Peter. It's been nicer than I thought talking to you.
Oh.
wasn't quite as
I don't know quite how to take that, Jane.
well. I was a little bit sort of anxious, but you did let it flow, and so I was. We actually just flowed, didn't we?
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant. Excellent. Well, listen, thanks very much. And speak to you soon.
Okay, we'll catch up soon. Bye.
And that's all for today's program. Many thanks to Jane Hindle of the R. Tucker Thompson Sailing Trust. True North will return in 2 weeks' time on the 11th of June, when I'll be speaking with Far North District Councillor Anne Court about the challenges facing Northland's council-owned roading infrastructure and about the reasons for and impact of disestablishing the Northland Transportation Alliance, which managed council roads for all 3 district councils and provided significant expertise and economy of scale. I'm Peter Heath. Thank you for listening. True North is an original podcast by Due North PR. To support our work and to stay on top of Northland business news and analysis, access the pod on Spotify, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook. Please do take that small extra step and subscribe, like, follow, comment, and review, as it helps others find the show. Please also share it with those who may not yet be aware that we exist. As the New Zealand media landscape continues to change, we rely on your support to continue doing what we do. Please let us know what you think about the podcast. Ask questions or make suggestions about topics and people we should feature by emailing us at truenorth@duenorthpr.co.nz. We do read every message.